In order to lose weight, this person hasn't eaten food for 20 years. In the end, he became as thin as a piece of paper. Since successfully losing weight, his life has become a mess. He must be careful when brushing his teeth, fearing that he might hurt himself, but he still goes for walks outside. After a few steps, he was blown up by the wind. Then the dog let him fly like a kite. The neighbor's child saw this scene, ran to tell his mother. The mother looked up, completely shocked. When he sat down to rest, the robot vacuum cleaner started sucking at his pant legs. When he played basketball with his friends, he almost got knocked over by the ball. His friend ran away immediately, never wanting to play with him again. When he tried to buy a cup of coffee, the server couldn't see him. It was an extremely awkward situation. Even driving became a luxury. Because he was so thin, he couldn't stay in the car at all. But soon, he started to get famous and was invited to a TV show. One of the female guests on the show, seeing his emaciated body, filled with jealousy in her eyes. He could only awkwardly smile. However, this strange body sometimes brought some benefits. One day, he passed by a vending machine and saw his favorite chips. Suddenly, he thought of a way to eat snacks for free. He decided to climb into the machine, easily grabbing the chips. Taking a bite felt amazing. However, unexpectedly, his body immediately returned to its original state. All his efforts were in vain. His weight loss plan had completely failed. The experts poured the creatures out of the iron bucket and placed them into the water tank. A fierce fish immediately appeared in front of everyone. Its unique shape perfectly matched the fossilized fish bones. This confirmed the expert's hypothesis. The expert reached his hand into the tank, but his hand was almost bitten off. He quickly notified everyone that this fish was a long-extinct piranha. These creatures are social animals and habitually prey on humans. But the expert was puzzled, as piranhas should have gone extinct tens of thousands of years ago. So why had they suddenly reappeared now? It turned out that just a few days ago, an earthquake occurred in the town, which caused a crack in the lake's bottom, releasing the ancient piranhas from an underground lake. A large whirlpool immediately appeared in the center of the lake, and the unfortunate fishermen were sucked into it, where they were instantly devoured by the piranhas. The next day, the sheriff, along with 3 officers, arrived at the lake center to investigate. They used instruments to scan for the huge crack caused by the earthquake. 2 officers immediately put on diving gear and dove into the water. Soon they entered the crack and discovered a huge underground entrance. For safety's sake, one officer stayed at the opening, while the other officer ventured inside. What he saw inside shocked him. Many glowing fish eggs were attached to column-like objects. The officer was about to reach out to touch them, but due to the dim light, he couldn't see clearly what they were. He hurriedly lit a flare, only to witness a terrifying scene. At that moment, he noticed that the safety rope connecting him to his teammate suddenly snapped. The officer at the opening sensed something was wrong and prepared to dive into the cave to investigate. A few young people found an advanced alien battle armor. They tried to cut it open with a chainsaw but couldn't even make a dent. Moreover, the damaged parts of the armor would automatically repair themselves when exposed to water. At this moment, Jack stood by and reached his hand into one of the tendrils on the armor. To his surprise, the heavy armor started moving with Jack's movements, but the next second the armor suddenly extended, countless fine needles piercing into Jack's skin. It took a great effort to pull his hand out. The story of this mech armor started 2 days ago. It all began when a very rare meteor shower occurred in Moscow. Many people rushed outside to watch, eager to witness this beautiful moment with their own eyes. Who would have thought that mixed among the meteors was an alien spaceship? The spaceship was knocked off course by a meteor and fell toward Earth with the falling stars. The military detected an unidentified object entering the atmosphere and immediately dispatched fighter jets to intercept it. Seeing that the spaceship wasn't responding, the fighter jets launched 2 missiles. After the spaceship was heavily damaged, it began to fall and created a massive energy shockwave, causing nearby fighter jets to lose control. At the same time, all the electronic devices of the onlookers lost signal. Everyone looked up and saw the spaceship flying toward the city with a blue tail flame. That's when people realized something was wrong and began fleeing in panic. But it was already too late. The force of the spaceship's impact caused it to slide along the ground, destroying all the buildings in its path. The spaceship wrecked everything before finally stopping at the stadium. The military realized the severity of the situation and immediately ordered the area to be locked down, preparing for contact with the alien civilization. Moments later, a cool-looking mech warrior walked out of the spaceship. During an adventure, Lisa discovered a mineral that could change its shape. Under the influence of external forces, no matter how the environment changed, it remained unaffected, always maintaining a constant temperature of 37 degrees, identical to the human body temperature. Lisa knew she had discovered something valuable. To verify her hypothesis, she quickly took several photos and sent them to an expert for appraisal, asking them to help estimate the price. At that moment, Lisa received a call from her father, bringing some heavy news that weighed on her heart. It turned out Lisa's sister had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and her father, unable to afford treatment, decided to give up. After hearing this, Lisa hurriedly told her father to wait for her, because as long as she could sell the mineral she had just found, she would be able to raise money for the treatment. So Lisa quickly rushed to the airport, boarded a helicopter heading to a local mining company, planning to sell the mineral on the black market. She had no idea that along the way she would face a life-and-death crisis. During the flight, Lisa saw a flock of birds in the distance through the window, which was unusual at such a high altitude. The pilot said he would be careful. Suddenly, the birds swarmed towards the helicopter, attacking the engine. The aircraft was damaged and began to lose control. The pilot could only try to control the direction of the aircraft, preparing for impact. As the pilot continuously reported the decreasing altitude, Lisa hurriedly fastened her seatbelt. Soon after, Lisa's vision went went black and she fell unconscious. Do you think Lisa will survive? Like and comment for updates on the follow-up. The man was woken up by an alarm in the cryo chamber. He hadn't yet figured out what was happening. When the artificial intelligence system of the Maximus automatically ejected his spacesuit, it was then that he realized their Polaris starship had been struck by a meteor. The hull was severely damaged. Thousands of miners were ejected into space. Some tragically collided with the ship, shattering into pieces, while others, like him, were ejected to the nearby planet Vitter. Due to the ship's rapid descent, the planet's surface temperature soared to over 1300 degrees. With death imminent, Jack urgently called for the system to lower the temperature. Luckily, just as he spoke, the ship successfully passed through the atmosphere, and the temperature began to drop. However, the ship remained out of control.
Master depleted. Click. Terrain alert. Terrain alert. Please.
After Jack successfully landed, he had just crawled out of the cryo chamber when the chamber flipped over, accidentally tearing his spacesuit. Jack quickly found liquid adhesive to repair the tear. At this point, oxygen was down to 42%. Jack returned to the cryo chamber and summoned the AI assistant Leonard to help locate the Polaris starship's position. However, the next moment, a burst of fire descended from the sky. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was the Polaris starship. Sure enough, the ship had crashed. And Jack was now trapped on this planet forever. This person possesses superpowers. He can easily deceive anyone. One time, he shaped his hand like a gun and pretended to shoot the woman. The woman immediately clutched her stomach as if she had been seriously injured, but in reality, she wasn't hurt at all. It was just an illusion he created. She quickly called the police and had him arrested. This person had already found his accomplice and once again used his superpowers. Suddenly, the police felt the weather turning cold. Hail began to strike their car. This sudden situation caused them to lose control of the vehicle. The police car flipped on the highway, then the patrol car slid all the way into a gas station. Later, the person confidently walked into a bank, wanting to cash a check for $50,000. The bank teller thought the amount was too large, so she took the check to confirm. At that moment, the person said, "You've made a mistake. This check is for $5,000. When the bank staff checked the check again, she discovered the $5,000 check had turned into $50,000. The bank teller apologized for her mistake and quickly helped him cash it. However, when the person left with the money, the bank staff noticed the check had turned into a newspaper. Back at home, he believed he could use his superpowers to heal his mother, who was in a vegetative state. When his eyes turned white, his mother slowly woke up, stimulated by his powers. The man cried tears of joy. Percy sat on a throne made of pure gold. Gears began to turn. Countless golden threads rapidly spread across his entire body. Annabeth sensed that something was wrong. She called for Percy to get up, but he decided to sacrifice himself. Soon, Percy's body was completely consumed by the chair. At this moment, the statue of the goddess behind them dropped its shield. Yet Annabeth did not pick up the shield before leaving. She tried to understand the mechanism behind it. Just then, Hephaestus suddenly appeared. He blew a whistle. A ladder immediately rose up, ready for Annabeth to leave. He told Annabeth that as long as she carried the shield out, she would become a hero. She would receive the highest honor. Even Athena, her mother, who had once been angry with her, would forgive her. But at this point, Annabeth no longer placed glory above all else as she once did. Her time with Percy had already changed her way of thinking. Now she only wanted to save Percy. Annabeth's words completely changed Hephaestus's mind. With the blowing of the whistle, the curse of the golden throne was lifted. Percy was able to escape. Soon, Annabeth and Percy returned to the dining hall with the shield. They handed the shield to Ares. Ares also fulfilled his promise. He summoned a truck, and the destination of this vehicle was Las Vegas. Hermes, the god of travel, often visited Las Vegas. As long as they presented an ancient Greek coin, they could summon him to lead them into the underworld. With Ares' help, Percy and Annabeth soon arrived safely in Las Vegas. Now their most important task was to find Hermes. The three of them entered the famous Lotus Hotel. In order to find Hermes as quickly as possible, they decided to split into two teams. Before leaving, Annabeth reminded Percy, under no circumstances should he eat anything inside the hotel. Otherwise, he would lose his memory. Jack was bound to the stone coffin, his limbs unable to move. The enormous axe above his head was slowly descending, swaying back and forth, and it seemed that his life was hanging by a thread. Despite the fear causing him to sweat profusely, he forced himself to remain calm, carefully observing the situation around him. He noticed that the water level in the tank was gradually dropping, and a spoon full of water and overflowing triggered the pulley mechanism, causing the axe to slowly slide downward. The situation grew more and more dangerous. He had to find a way to stop the water flow quickly. The axe was already close to his waist. Time was running out. There was no time to hesitate. He struggled to take off one of his shoes and threw it at the nearby mechanical device but missed. The axe fell again, this time nearly grazing his belt buckle. He knew he had no choice. He quickly threw the remaining shoe. Luckily, this time he succeeded. The mechanism was activated and a mannequin with hair dropped into the water tank. The hair slowly began to flow toward the tank's drainage pipe. Jack was teetering on the edge of life and death. He knew that fully blocking the water flow would take time, and the axe began descending again. Jack was so nervous he could barely breathe. In his mind, he knew that if the axe descended even a little more, he was finished. Miraculously, the hair finally blocked the drainage pipe, and the water flow completely stopped. Jack had successfully saved himself. But just then, a janitor entered, and upon seeing the scene before him, he screamed in shock. The man entered the hibernation pod, preparing to enter a state of winter sleep. However, after waiting for a long time, there was no response. What was worse was that the oxygen inside the pod was rapidly depleting, causing him to feel suffocated. The man used all his strength to try to open the pod's door. At the critical moment, the pod automatically opened due to a malfunction. He discovered that the spaceship he was on would take 90 years to reach their new home, and the other passengers were all in normal hibernation. Only he had been awakened early. Jack immediately went to the transmission room to attempt to send a distress signal to Earth. However, the system displayed that the message would take 19 years to reach Earth, and the reply would take at least 55 years. Jack went to the control room for help, but was prevented from entering because the gaps inside the ship were too small. No matter what he tried, he couldn't open the iron door. In despair, Jack wandered aimlessly around the ship. Suddenly, he saw someone standing at the front desk. Upon getting closer, he realized it was just a robot. Jack completely broke down. He decided to make full use of the remaining time, no longer following the ship's rules. He pried open the presidential suite's door, enjoying various free entertainment facilities. When he got tired, he went to the luxury restaurant to taste all kinds of delicacies. He almost experienced every area of the ship, but soon his heart became empty. One day, he went to the spacesuit experience area, put on a spacesuit and walked out of the ship. However, facing the endless universe, his heart became even emptier. After returning to the ship, he took off the spacesuit, opened the door again, and prepared to end it all. The man was punched. However, his fist was firmly held. The attacker looked extremely shocked. What was even more surprising was that when the man was hanging upside down from the ceiling, his legs kept stretching like noodles until he fell to the ground. The bystanders were stunned. After a while, the man was sent to the laboratory. The staff, just starting their shift, were startled by the strange phenomenon. A woman picked up the man's shoes and quickly ran to the room. The man was lying on the bed in pain, feeling unable to breathe. After analyzing with instruments, it was found that his cells were rapidly mutating. The man felt very upset, hoping to return to his original state. The nurse comforted him to stay calm, but unexpectedly his arm was stretched out. Frightened, she dropped the arm on the ground and stepped on it. In the chaos, the potion sprayed onto the man's face. As a result, he was choked and sneezed. The next second, his entire face suddenly collapsed. The scene shocked and disgusted everyone present. He could not control his superpower. Researchers arrived at the office to search for his pre-mutation DNA. After searching everywhere, the woman finally found a comb with the man's hair on it. After careful processing, the man's face soon returned to its original appearance. The laboratory successfully developed a treatment serum. The man immediately drank it. The next second, his limbs suddenly contracted, and his body returned to its original form. He could hardly believe what was happening before his eyes, even seeing his large belly start to shrink, becoming as firm as muscle. In the subway, a group of people were attacked by vampires. The captain was the first to open fire, trying to fight against the vampire leader, but the vampire's speed was faster than the bullet. Despite firing many shots, the bullets ran out without hitting the target. A man charged forward to engage in hand-to-hand combat, but was quickly defeated by the vampire. Other members of the team also rushed in, but were all knocked down. The captain calmed down, reloaded his gun. The vampire suddenly approached him, and the captain discarded his handgun, taking a Gatling gun from the carriage.
Sure. A treat for our guests.
Facing the captain's intense firepower, the vampire either died or was wounded. At that moment, a vampire jumped off the train, smashed the driver's cabin glass, and lunged at the driver. The captain did not notice this, still focused on suppressing the vampires, but the driver's situation became very dangerous. It was then that the captain finally heard the driver's cry for help. The vampire leader realized that the train was about to exit the tunnel, exposing it to sunlight. The female vampire screamed for help, but the vampire leader chose to retreat. He saw the female vampire tied to the train carriage, but was powerless to help her. Seizing the opportunity, he fled. The driver quickly covered the female vampire with his clothes, but that female vampire was not so fortunate, instantly burned to ashes by the sunlight. Watching the train leave, the vampire leader decided to infect more humans, to take revenge on these people. So that night he went to a bar with his subordinates. Unaware young people were about to face a terrible fate. The scientists cultivated a giant locust and were preparing to collect samples. However, unexpectedly, the locust in their hands suddenly went out of control. Immediately after, tens of thousands of locusts were activated. Upon seeing this, the two people desperately ran towards the exit. Fortunately, they climbed up to the large door, entered the quarantine room, and activated the disinfection procedure. But in the chaos, the female scientist's authorization wristband fell to the ground. When they almost lost hope, the man picked up the wristband. Although his body was in pain, the two ultimately managed to escape. The company's head noticed the locusts had gone out of control. To prevent a leak of information, he immediately ordered the activation of the flame device to destroy the locusts. However, strangely, these newly bred locusts were not afraid of fire. In fact, they had undergone genetic mutations and became stronger under the high-temperature stimuli. Soon they overwhelmed everything. The mutated locusts broke out of the laboratory and flew towards a nearby farm. At the farm, a brother and sister were feeding poultry. Suddenly, they were terrified by the massive swarm of locusts flying from the sky. The locusts quickly approached, and they had no choice but to desperately search for a shelter. Although they managed to hide in a warehouse, when the door was closed, they saw an even more terrifying sight. A giant locust suddenly charged in. The boy hurriedly covered it with an iron bucket, but his size was no match for the swarm. In the end, both children were taken by the locusts. Not long after, the incident drew the attention of the police. They arrived at the scene to investigate and found that the wheat field had been consumed by locusts. Only John's farmland remained intact. The police immediately realized something was wrong. They ultimately discovered that it was all part of John's scheme. He had secretly been researching mutated locusts behind the scenes. The ferocious crocodile kept rolling and fell into a deep abyss that was a kilometer deep. The two people hid under a cliff and were extremely shocked by the scene, almost fainting. At that moment, one crocodile stopped, but another one followed closely behind and plunged into the abyss. Soon all the crocodiles fell into the abyss. The two thought the danger had passed, but just at the next moment, a giant crocodile king appeared. The two quickly fled from the edge of the abyss, but unfortunately they ran into the crocodile's nest. More crocodiles were disturbed and crazily crawled towards a shaky place. It was a wooden bridge a kilometer high. The giant crocodile chased after them fiercely, but its excessive weight caused the planks on the bridge to start shaking. Just when one of them was in danger, he saw that his teammate had already reached the other end of the bridge. Without hesitation, he pulled out a 300-meter-long dagger and cut the bridge, successfully stopping the crocodile's pursuit. However, he himself was in great danger. Fortunately, the man reacted quickly, jumped and grabbed a rock 1,000 meters away. The broken bridge sent chills down his spine. When the others recovered, they thought they had escaped the most dangerous part, but they didn't know they had just disturbed an even more terrifying monster. The scene was incredibly thrilling and realistic. Every frame was astonishing. I strongly recommend everyone to watch the original film. Guaranteed you won't be disappointed.
Turn it off! Noise.
Keep him quiet. Keep him quiet. Shut him up!
The dog in the car kept barking, and the noise attracted more and more monsters outside. The people in the car couldn't stop the dog from barking. The number of monsters kept increasing, and the outside was nearly crushed. The monsters started attacking the car windows, seemingly searching for a way in. At that moment, Uncle Glenn nearby heard the sounds and immediately started shooting. The gunshots attracted all the monsters, and instantly they surged toward Glenn. This gave the people in the car a chance to breathe. They knew they had to make a decision quickly. Reluctantly, the man took the dog out of the car's trunk and threw it outside. Although everyone was sad, it was the only way to survive. Soon after, the surroundings became quiet again. The man cautiously opened the car door and slowly extended his right foot. Before leaving, he tightly closed the car door. Just as he was looking for a hiding place, the elderly grandmother in the car suddenly had an asthma attack. Her coughing noise drew the monsters back. Everyone held their breath. At that moment, he suddenly realized that the monsters were blind. They could only track targets through sound. Unable to find the target, the monsters finally left after he picked up a metal rod. And they realized it couldn't be eaten. Later, they buried Uncle Glenn. The father, with his family, set off on foot toward the countryside. After dark, they arrived at a farmhouse. The father intended to knock on the door and ask to stay, but found a bell tied to the door. The sound of the bell quickly attracted the monsters. The elderly woman living alone, upon hearing the noise, grabbed a shotgun to chase the monsters away. However, she was attacked by a swarm of monsters and quickly fell silent. A woman injected a zombie worm into her body and gained immortality. The worm virus quickly spread throughout her body. In the next moment, the worm was activated. It began to spread inside her body, instantly healing all her wounds and leaving behind a perfect body. The bullet fragments inside her body were pushed out, piercing through the skin and falling to the ground. The healed woman became fearless. A fire extinguisher hit her face but left no scars. The bald man was punched in the chest. His ribs cracked and his heart stopped beating. The long-haired man tried to ambush her, but was struck while flying across the room, immediately falling down. Only Lena remained. She fired wildly. The bullets hit the woman but had no effect. This only made her angrier. The woman charged forward, landing a punch on Lena. Lena's bones instantly shattered and she collapsed to the ground. Suddenly, Lena saw zombies hiding under the ice. A clever plan quickly formed in her mind. She picked up the submachine gun and fiercely sprayed the area under the woman's feet. The ice surface immediately shattered, and the woman fell into the cold seawater. Then countless zombies surged forward and dragged her into the depths of the sea. After a while, Lena and the others arrived at humanity's last base. Here she met the head of Umbrella Corporation, Wesker. Wesker took out a T-virus syringe and injected it into Lena's body, restoring her superhuman abilities. Only then could Lena possibly save humanity. Later, Lena stood on the rooftop looking into the distance. Millions of zombies and countless mutated creatures were besieging the base. This would be humanity's final battle. The man reached into the body of a rebel and took his soul out, directly displaying it before everyone. The people on Earth were terrified. From what they saw, the rebel's soul had already separated from his body. The man then destroyed the soul, and the rebel fell to the ground dead because he possessed overwhelming power. The other rebels immediately knelt and begged for mercy. The only one who did not surrender was one person. His resistance drew everyone's attention. A commander shouted at him in anger, ordering him to kneel and swear allegiance. However, the man firmly declared that he would never kneel to anyone. Just as the commander was about to issue another order, the man spoke, stating that he only wanted to defeat the champion, because this society revered victors. Any challenge should be accepted. The commander took a step back and allowed him to challenge, so the champion charged at the man with an axe, attacking with brute force. But the man easily dodged, seized the short blade from his opponent's belt, and swiftly killed the champion. Everyone was stunned. The deceased was one of their strongest warriors, and this stranger had effortlessly ended his life. Even the highest commander was shocked. However, the commander did not express anger, but instead wanted to recruit him. After all, true power is always worthy of respect. He personally handed over the trophy, the dagger, to the man, and sincerely invited him to join his faction. But the man showed no interest in the offer, which made the commander very uncomfortable. Just as the commander was about to lose his temper, he inadvertently touched the man's hand, and felt a strange sense of familiarity. After a brief hesitation, he realized that the man possessed extraordinary power. Thus the commander ordered the guards to take the man to the base for re-education. The guards quickly surrounded him, and the atmosphere became tense. At this moment the queen appeared. She pretended to invite the man to tour the base, but secretly had a more sinister plan. Although the man agreed, her plan did not go as expected, because he was only pretending to cooperate, and his true intention was to uncover their secrets. The man woke up to find a rope tied around his neck. There was a small hole in the wall. The hole extended all the way into the adjacent room. He couldn't understand what was happening, so he gently pulled on the rope. Suddenly a girl's scream came from the other room. He thought he had misheard. After pulling the rope again, he realized that the rope had tied both of them together, so the man approached the hole in the wall, trying to see what was going on in the next room. It appeared that no one was there. When he tried to look more closely, he was suddenly startled. He asked who was in the next room. At that moment, the rope suddenly tightened, pulling the man against the wall. He tried to pull the rope back, but was unsuccessful. He felt like he couldn't breathe. The man began to knock on the wall forcefully, begging the other person to loosen the rope, but the other person kept pulling the rope tight. Fortunately, the man's strength was greater than the girl's. He finally got a brief moment to breathe. The man leaned closer to the hole, asking if the girl also had a rope tied around her neck. The girl didn't know what was happening either. The man tried to break the rope with his hands, but it didn't work. When the man wanted to discuss how to escape with the girl suddenly shouted a name. The man asked her who she was looking for. It turned out she was looking for her pet dog. The man was a bit helpless, feeling that the most important thing now was to get the rope off his neck, and that finding the dog could wait until they were free. But the girl wouldn't listen, muttering that she had to find her dog. The man had no choice but to apologize to the girl, admitting that he hadn't been patient earlier. He asked if there was a tool to cut the rope on her side. The girl broke down emotionally, rejecting the man's suggestion to find a tool. The man had to figure it out himself. At that moment, a 3-minute countdown suddenly appeared on the computer screen. Jack discovered some anomalies in the robot charging area. In front of charging station number 206, there was a reflective spot. Jack walked over to investigate and found that the steel plate had been polished to a mirror finish. He couldn't help but wonder, could it be that robots are capable of defying the rules set by humans? Just as he was puzzled, a robot entered the charging area. Jack noticed that the robot's serial number was exactly 206, the repairman. The repairman glanced at the charging station, then directly turned away from charging and left. Jack was stunned for a few seconds before realizing he should follow and see what was going on. He ran outside and saw that the repairman had already entered a tunnel. Before leaving, the repairman looked back, and after a brief eye contact with Jack, he quickened his pace and left. Jack followed closely behind, entering the tunnel. Unexpectedly, the repairman welded the iron door shut. Jack had no choice but to continue walking along the tunnel. Soon he arrived at the tunnel's exit, which led to a dangerous civilian area. Once he stepped into it, he would no longer be under the company's protection. Jack found the body of a homeless person in a pile of garbage. Suddenly, a few gunshots came flying toward him. Jack tried to identify himself, but the soldiers on guard completely ignored him. Everyone outside the city was considered an enemy. He put all his strength into running into an abandoned container, just managing to escape the danger temporarily. To his surprise, the repairman was also hiding in the container. The repairman rotated his mechanical head, looking at the box in his hands. Jack was very curious about what was inside the box, but the repairman didn't respond. He suddenly knocked over a nearby gasoline barrel and activated a welding torch. In order to conceal the secret of the box, the repairman even violated the rules and injured himself. This action was incomprehensible to Jack. Humans had written obedience into the robot's codes when designing them, so how could a robot break this rule? Jack brought the repairman back to the laboratory. However, the engineers didn't believe Jack's story at all because they believed the code could never be wrong. The engineer took out the burnt box, which contained some sensor parts and a nuclear energy battery. Although this battery was a rare resource, it was of no use to the robot because once this kind of battery was installed, the robot's core would be destroyed by the immense energy. The engineer connected the repairman's maintenance circuit and forcibly rebooted the damaged core. As a result, the repairman gained temporary life. Jack quickly asked about the purpose of the battery. Just as the repairman was about to answer, the repairman suddenly short-circuited, and 2 streams of oil poured from his eyes, destroying the machine core.
¡Hey! ¡Joder! ¡Son demasiados! ¡Dame la
Three fearless scientists. In order to trace the ancient Godzilla's whereabouts, they ventured into a testing ground where a nuclear radiation leak had occurred. Because Godzilla feeds on radiation, they believed there must be traces of Godzilla here. However, upon entering the testing ground, they discovered a strange phenomenon. The nuclear radiation, which should have lasted for a century, was completely undetectable. They speculated that Godzilla might be sleeping beneath the testing ground, so they decided to detonate a bomb to awaken it. However, after the bomb exploded, they found only a few giant cavities underground, with no trace of Godzilla appearing. So what exactly absorbed all the nuclear radiation here? To uncover the truth, the three of them decided to delve deeper into the testing ground. When they entered a massive building, they found a large number of glowing giant eggs hidden underground. Each egg contained a life form ready to hatch. The scientists hypothesized that these might be Godzilla's offspring, so they decided to go down and collect samples. Although the male scientist tried to dissuade them, he couldn't stop them, so the two of them decided to leave one person above to guard while the other would descend with a rope. Upon reaching underground, they discovered that the life forms inside the eggs resembled Godzilla, with tough exoskeletons. The female scientist prepared to collect samples for research. However, when she touched one of the giant eggs, the ground suddenly began to shake violently and cracked open. Then all the giant eggs started to rupture, but instead of Godzilla's offspring, a swarm of gigantic, bizarre beetles emerged. Realizing the situation was critical, the three of them quickly attempted to climb the rope to escape, but it was too late. The beetles in swarms surged toward them. The female scientist was unfortunate enough to have her foot tangled by the beetles while escaping. The male scientist tried to shoot at the beetles to help her escape, but the limited bullets were utterly ineffective against the beetles. Despite his desperate attempt to empty the magazine, he ultimately failed to save the female scientist's life. The woman was injected with the DNA of a swan. Black scales began to spread from her hands. At the same time, dark fur started to grow on her back. Curiously, she reached out to touch them, and despite the pain, she pulled a black feather out from under her skin. She was simply performing a swan ballet at the time. That's when she started to notice how the feathers were growing. Then her feet began to change. She lost her balance and fell to the ground. Quickly, she took off her shoes to check, and found that her toes had fused together like the webbed feet of a swan. She realized something was wrong, so she checked the other foot. The situation was worse. All her toes were completely fused, unable to separate. Her transformation was becoming more and more like a swan. The woman decided to become the lead dancer of the Black Swan. To replace her, she pushed the lead dancer to the ground. The lead dancer angrily grabbed her neck, but at this moment, the woman's neck had already transformed, becoming like that of a black swan. Taking advantage of the lead dancer's distraction, she grabbed a shard of glass from the ground and stabbed him. She then hid the body away. In the end, she successfully replaced the lead dancer of the Black Swan. Soon she took the stage, and her body's transformation became even more apparent. At that point, her hands had grown black scales, and the feathers on her wings began to grow along her arms. She was thrilled because she could finally dance like a swan. She continued to perform excitedly, and with every spin, the black feathers on her body grew longer. In just a few seconds, they turned into wings. Other parts of her body were rapidly covered in black scales, and her entire body turned black. By the end of the performance, she had completely transformed into a black swan. Her brilliant performance earned the cheers of the audience. The woman had achieved her goal and became the top dancer. This is an alien giant. Under the general's orders, the soldiers quickly transported 3 special metal plates and sealed the giant inside a small metal box, completely isolating it from the outside world. Once the seal was completed, the alien giant would be transported through an underground tunnel to a secret base. Humanity's goal was to dissect the giant and conduct research, hoping to acquire advanced technology from it. However, no one noticed that a titanium alloy drill was being devoured by a swarm of nanobots and rapidly reproducing. Soon the commander detected some abnormal situations. The equipment supporting the giant was being damaged, and the source of the problem was these nanobots. Not even million-dollar bulletproof glass could stop their invasion. The commander immediately initiated emergency measures, and flames at thousands of degrees shot out from below. As the flames gradually extinguished, the giant remained unharmed. The sight before them stunned everyone. The giant raised both hands, and its body began to disintegrate into thousands of nanobots, which immediately flew out of the experimental chamber and spread onto the highway. In less than a few seconds, a moving truck was completely devoured, and even the nearby billboard wasn't spared. The number of nanobots rapidly increased, spreading to every corner of the city. Within seconds, the massive stadium was completely consumed. Humanity was about to face an unimaginable disaster. The only one who could save them was an alien named Jack. Mary begged him to stop all of this. At that moment, Mary's son suddenly started bleeding from his nose. It turned out that he had been infected by the nanobots. Mary realized she had also been attacked, but she begged the alien to save her son first. Her selfless act stunned the alien, because this was a unique human emotion. Then the alien grabbed their hands and absorbed the nanobots back into its body. Finally, it decided to give humanity another chance. Under Mary's gaze, the alien walked out of the shelter and touched the glowing sphere, shutting down the Earth destruction plan. With the pulse emitted from the sphere, all the nanobots lost their vitality, falling to the ground like rain. Humanity successfully avoided the disaster, and the world returned to peace. A strange meteorite suddenly fell, and its fragments began to rapidly expand. As a nurse passed by, she witnessed this bizarre scene. In just a few seconds, the meteorite fragments expanded by dozens of meters, shining and glistening like golden crispy skin. The nurse stopped in surprise, and out of curiosity she reached out to touch it. At that moment, the outer shell, like a banana peel, slowly cracked open and several colorful tentacles emerged from the fragments. They quickly flew toward the nurse, restraining her. Then the tentacles flew toward others. No one had ever seen such a monster, and everyone scattered in a panic. Meanwhile, a man had just woken up from a dream. Before he could react, a tentacle pierced toward him, easily restraining him. In less than an hour, everyone was controlled by the tentacles. At this critical moment, Jack slowly walked over. The tentacles seemed to fear him, retreating back. Everyone who had been controlled returned to normal. Eventually, the tentacles reverted back to the form of the meteorite. Meanwhile, in another location, the man gently extended his hand, and a long tentacle shot toward a red orb in the sky. The next second, the red orb exploded, instantly consuming the entire street. Now the question arises, do you think Jack can stop this citywide crisis? An arrow bent 90 degrees in midair and accurately hit the target. This is the girl's special skill. Her name is Jenny. She has been hunting with her father since childhood. With this skill, she always returns with a bountiful harvest after every hunt. However, that day, her peaceful life was shattered. When Jenny returned from hunting that day, she saw a huge fire rising in the distance. It turned out that the giants had broken through the high walls and began to hunt humans recklessly. In order to survive, Jenny and her family had to flee. During the escape, Jenny's father was captured by a giant. Losing her father, Jenny decided to join a monster hunter squad. They were to engage in life-and-death combat with the giants. Jenny also secretly imprisoned a giant, hoping to discover its weaknesses. She secured the giant with an iron lock, and through experiments, she found that if the windows were closed, the giant would become quiet and its movements would slow down. But as time passed, Jenny still hadn't found the true weakness of the giant. Soon, Tom discovered this. Tom was shocked when he saw the imprisoned giant, and he quickly went to inform the captain. The captain believed Jenny's actions were too dangerous, and the giant had to be dealt with. Suddenly, the giant sensed a threat, broke free from its restraints, grabbed Jenny, and tried to swallow her. The boy suddenly took off his hat, turned around, and glanced at the classmate behind him. In that instant, the classmate immediately turned into a statue. This school is a magical academy. Ever since Wednesday defeated the demon and saved the entire academy, all the students began to idolize her. Even the principal was no exception. The principal personally invited Wednesday to the bonfire party, asking her to speak as an honor student. Meanwhile, a few students from the academy were using their abilities to build an eagle out of wood as preparation for the party. On the other side, when Wednesday returned to her dorm, she suddenly noticed that her novel was missing. Only a letter was left on the desk. The letter said that her novel would be burned at the bonfire party. Wednesday was furious when she saw the letter. After all, it was the result of 2 years of hard work, and it was the only manuscript she had. She decided to head to the bonfire party site to search for her novel. She asked her severed hand to help with the search. At the scene, someone accidentally bumped into her, and Wednesday felt something in her pocket. She took out a letter which said her novel was under the bonfire. Without hesitation, Wednesday dove into the bonfire to search for her novel. The werewolf girl saw this and quickly ran over to stop her because the principal was about to ignite the bonfire. However, Wednesday, determined to find her novel, ignored everything, and just then the event officially began. After the principal made some meaningless speeches, he suddenly shot a beam of flame toward the bonfire pile, and the wooden eagle was instantly ignited. Then a group of students stretched out their hands using their abilities to control the eagle. Under everyone's gaze, the eagle actually flew into the sky. Everyone was captivated by this spectacular scene, except the werewolf girl, who anxiously called out Wednesday's name. This is one of the strongest titanium alloy drill bits in the world. It is specifically designed to withstand extreme environments. However, in the microscopic world, it is being devoured by thousands of tiny organisms. In less than a second, the sharp tip of the drill bit completely disappears. The scientists are stunned by what they are seeing and quickly realize the situation is critical. Immediate evacuation is necessary. However, the commander notices some alarming phenomena. The equipment supporting the massive device is being destroyed, and the source of all this destruction is that group of insects. Even the million-dollar bulletproof glass fails to withstand their assault. The commander immediately initiates emergency protocols. Flames at thousands of degrees Celsius shoot up from below. As the flames gradually subside, the massive device remains intact. The scene before them leaves everyone in shock. The massive device's hands are raised high, and its body begins to disintegrate into countless tiny nanobots. In an instant, these nanobots fly out of the experimental chamber. Soon, the 40-meter-high iron door is pushed open by the nanobots. The army waiting outside sees this and immediately launches an attack. However, countless shells are fired, but the nanobots quickly absorb the energy and reproduce even more nanobots. Those witnessing this chaos start to panic and flee, but it's too late. In the end, the nanobots devour them, and then spread onto the roads. In just a few seconds, a moving truck is consumed, leaving no trace, not even bones. Even the nearby billboard doesn't escape unscathed. The nanobots multiply rapidly, spreading to every corner of the city. The huge stadium is consumed within seconds. As for where these insects came from, stay tuned for the next episode.
Oh, shit. What the Whoa!
The man's hand was stuck in the wall. He desperately tried to free himself, but there was no way. His teammates heard the noise and immediately ran over. They quickly moved forward to help, but it seemed like the wall was moving along with the hand. The scene was extremely bizarre. The teammates tried to pull Jack out. Finally, the two of them exerted force together. Jack was finally freed. However, the expressions on his teammates' faces were very strange. Jack had no idea why, until he followed their gaze and slowly looked at his own arm.
Where's my bloody arm?
Doctor on the spaceship examined Jack's arm. The wound was clean and neat, and there was no pain. The doctor had never seen such a situation before. Everyone was at a loss. Just then, a strange sound suddenly came from the hallway. When they ran over, they found Jack's arm was falling on the ground. It was slowly getting closer to them. They quickly trapped the arm with tempered glass. To their surprise, the arm began to write a line of words on the table.
What are you talking about, arm?
By the time they realized what was happening and tried to escape, it was already too late. A corpse washed up on the shore. It was a giant who had drowned. From the outside, it seemed he had just recently died. His eyes were still clear, a bright green. He had a high nose bridge and thick lips. He looked handsome, like a prince from the land of giants. His physique was strong and well-proportioned. He resembled a hero from Greek mythology. In the palm of his hand, there was still a small pool of seawater. A few small fish swam within it. At first, people just watched from a distance. Soon, someone climbed onto the giant's body. Applause erupted from the shore. Then more people followed and climbed up. They treated the giant's body like a playground. Some played around on his chest. Others danced on the tip of his nose. In the face of all this, the giant seemed to silently gaze on. Thus, they played from day to night. 3 days passed. The giant's body began to decay. But the people's enthusiasm did not wane. A few workers even discussed cutting the giant's body into pieces and transporting them. At this point, the giant lay quietly. His eyes were no longer clear. The water in his palm had dried up. It seemed to signal complete decomposition. People began to scribble on his body. Even though he had died, it seemed the giant could still feel pain. Later, his head was severed. The bones were made into ornaments for the town. In the end, the once beautiful body was reduced to a pile of remains. Aside from seagulls, no one remembered his existence. This is a very tough nanomaterial, capable not only of bouncing bullets but also of withstanding any damage. It was only then that everyone realized the terrifying nature of this black wall, but they were trapped in the apartment, unable to escape. Out of curiosity, someone took out their phone and pretended to take a photo of the black wall. When the phone's flash went off, a strange thing happened. The black wall suddenly changed. The woman speculated that it might be a portal, so she curiously walked forward, tentatively extending her finger to touch it. She found it very strange, then pushed her whole hand into the black wall. Suddenly, there was a reaction from within the wall. Seeing something was wrong, her husband urgently told her to pull her hand back, but the woman couldn't retract her hand at all. Before anyone could react, her lower body was already being pulled in. Though they tried everything to pull her out, it was useless. At that moment, one of the companions noticed that the black wall was solidifying. They had to act quickly. The husband could no longer bear to watch. Only Jack and his girlfriend remained trapped inside the room. They turned on their phone's flash again, and the black wall was once again successfully opened. After passing through a tunnel, they finally escaped the room. However, when they stepped outside, they were shocked to find that all the buildings outside were wrapped in the black wall. Jack opened the rescue pack on the spaceship, taking out the survival gear. According to the equipment's program, it began scanning Earth. To his surprise, he discovered that he had arrived on Earth in the 8th century, and there were no rescue ships nearby. Jack had no choice but to survive in this wilderness. Next, the device projected a neural interface, downloading Earth's environmental data and universal language directly into Jack's brain. Although Jack appeared human, he was actually an alien. After the information transfer was completed, Jack rubbed his aching head, then took a weapon from the rescue box and quickly tested it. Given Earth's current level of civilization, this weapon was extremely powerful. He buried his teammates in a pile of stones, sent a distress signal, and began his journey of exploration. Jack traversed through the dense forest and found a whale carcass piled on rocks. This was the Viking tribe's location, but the village was completely deserted. The wooden house doors had huge claw marks. Jack immediately raised his weapon, alertly scanning the surroundings, suspecting that the creature might still be nearby. Suddenly, a shadow flashed through the forest, catching Jack's attention. He cautiously pursued it. Just as he was focusing on aiming, a man riding a horse suddenly charged at him, knocking him flying. Jack's weapon also fell from his hands. Jack fell into unconsciousness. When Jack woke up, he found himself surrounded by a group of Vikings. Lucifer once challenged God, but unexpectedly he was defeated by the Archangel Michael. Afterward, Lucifer was cast into hell. To prevent his return to Earth, Michael followed him into hell. He locked him in place and sealed him with the Holy Cross sword. When Michael left, Lucifer mocked him from behind, saying that he would rather be a king in hell than a slave in heaven. He also declared that one day he would return to Earth with a legion of demons, become Michael's master, and ascend to heaven once again. 1,000 years later, a church dedicated to Lucifer was built on a snow-covered mountain in the far west. During a grand exhibition, the Shroud of Christ was publicly displayed for the first time, and the DNA remnants on it drew widespread attention from the academic world. Rosa, a student of biology, was among those interested. He visited the church through a priest he knew, Father Marco. After touring the fruit section, he casually walked over to the statue where Michael had sealed Lucifer. Marco briefly introduced the statue, then went off to attend to other matters. Rosa, captivated by the exquisite carvings, continued sketching late into the night. After everyone else had left the church, suddenly the head of the Lucifer statue moved. At the same time, a dark shadow appeared behind Rosa. When he turned around, he saw nothing. 3,000 years ago, the dark side arrived in the Americas. His planet was being destroyed by weapons. As soon as he landed on Earth, he picked up a handful of soil. After confirming that this planet was worthy of his rule, the dark side swung his war spear and cleaved the continent in half. Lava erupted from the Earth's crust until the Earth's defense forces engraved the Darkseid symbol onto the surface of the planet. This mark declared Earth as his property. Meanwhile, the mother box began to charge. Once fully charged, all intelligent life would turn into subatomic particles to stop the Darkseid's invasion. The four major tribes, once in conflict, began to cooperate. Whether it was the old gods, the Amazons, or the humans and the Atlanteans, they all went all out, preparing for battle. When the fleet sent by the Darkseid arrived on Earth, the Amazon Queen immediately drew her sword, preparing for battle. With a furious roar, tens of thousands of allied forces launched their full assault. Despite the massive power of the Darkseid's forces, they were clearly at a disadvantage when facing the United Alliance. Zeus fired a thunderbolt that exploded. The Amazon warriors behind quickly shot arrows, killing 3 high priests. Seeing the situation was turning against him, the Darkseid angrily entered berserk mode. Green Lantern attempted a sneak attack, but was kicked away by the Darkseid, even cruelly having one of his hands severed. Fortunately, the Huntress intervened in time. The Atlantean king followed up with an attack, stunning the Darkseid. However, the Darkseid had not yet recovered. The God King Zeus unleashed lightning to firmly pin him down. Then Ares leaped up with his battle axe, inflicting severe injuries on the Darkseid. Although the Darkseid was eventually captured due to his severe injuries, he fell into a prolonged coma. As time passed, the Darkseid's army began to retreat. Zeus once again gathered lightning energy and struck to forcibly separate the merged mother box. As the Darkseid's army fled in disarray, this epic war was finally declared over. When the soldiers had finished building the defense system, the barbarian army launched a fierce charge. Seeing this, the prince immediately ordered the soldiers to take action. The soldiers hooked the iron hooks onto the stone ball. Then, at the princess's command, the launcher raised the giant hammer, smashing the chain. The red carpet was connected to the stone ball, and in an instant the stone ball soared into the air and charged toward the enemy like a tide. At this moment, the barbarian army was still wildly attacking, completely unaware of the impending disaster. Soon, the red carpet flew over the enemy camp, and the 200-ton stone ball crashed heavily into the crowd. The red carpet followed closely behind, joining the stone ball as it was thrown into the enemy ranks. The tremendous inertia instantly knocked down the barbarian army. Many barbarians, frightened, scattered and fled, like headless flies crashing around. When they finally struggled out of the fabric, they found the fabric covered in grease. Seeing the right opportunity, the prince immediately shot a penetrating arrow, which instantly ignited the red cloth curtain. The flames quickly spread, and the barbarians struggled in the fire, their screams echoing. The barbarian king was so furious that he nearly... The enemy tightly clamped an iron ring around the monk's head. Even the slightest movement could lead to death. The monk's friends watched this scene, feeling extremely worried. The enemy grinned foolishly in satisfaction. Despite the imminent threat of death, the monk remained calm and continued to silently pray. Just as the enemy was about to strike, an iron ring suddenly wrapped around his own head. The ring began to tighten, and his panic grew stronger. As he had no idea how to stop this pain, he rolled away from the monk's side. The monk hoped the enemy would abandon violence, but the enemy still refused to listen. In his agony, he struggled wildly, destroying the things around him. The monk continued chanting silently. The iron ring on the enemy's head kept tightening. At the brink of life and death, his life was being squeezed little by little. Finally, the enemy agreed to stop moving. The iron ring slowly loosened, preventing the enemy from dying. The enemy looked at the monk, who gently flicked a weapon, causing it to spin. The steel ring on the enemy's head was immediately shattered. The enemy stood frozen in fear, realizing that he was no match for the monk. Terrified, the enemy knelt and begged for mercy. Unexpectedly, the golden dragon on the pillar suddenly started to move. To understand the situation, we have to go back 1 hour. At that time, the man performed magic in the grand hall to become king. Jack raised his hands and immediately dark clouds covered the entire hall. Jessica threw a few small balls from behind and thunder and rain began to pour from the clouds in an instant. Everyone was frightened, but the king quickly saw through the secret behind it. Jack then blew on the flute in his hand, and it really started to rain inside the hall. Everyone was even more shocked. Taking advantage of this, Jack threatened the king, demanding that he give the throne to him. As soon as he finished speaking, dark clouds rose in the hall again, even more terrifying than before. This made Jessica feel puzzled because this wasn't part of their plan. At that moment, the golden dragon on the pillar suddenly moved. The entire hall fell into chaos. However, the king remained calm, even praising the golden dragon. Although everyone was terrified inside, they still echoed the praise of the golden dragon. Strangely, the golden dragon did not attack the king but turned its head to look at Jack and his companions. The golden dragon spat out a ball of flame, sending Tom straight to hell. Seeing this, the nearby companions threw smoke bombs to try to escape, but they were swallowed by the golden dragon in one bite. Everyone was horrified. The strangest thing was, the golden dragon didn't attack anyone else. After giving everyone a glance, it spiraled upward, broke through the roof and flew out. That person provocatively pointed to his forehead, then picked up the bow and arrow from the ground, broke the bow in half and said the bow was too fragile. At that moment, the general on the city wall was completely enraged, and he shot another arrow, but that arrow was intercepted by a woman behind the man, who shot it down with her bow and arrow. The general realized that these people were not ordinary, so he immediately ordered his subordinates to stay alert to avoid conflict. Next, the general had a cart of grain sent out through the city gates, telling them to eat their fill and leave quickly. At that time, the general still didn't know that the man standing before him, whom he mistook for a refugee, was none other than Jack, who would one day lead 50 men to defeat 50,000 enemy troops. At that time, the enemy was launching a massive invasion of his homeland, and Jack's hometown, located on the invasion route, suffered severe destruction from the enemy forces. To protect his hometown and the people, 21-year-old Jack spontaneously organized a militia and fought bravely against the enemy. However, due to the vast disparity in strength between the two sides, after several rounds of fierce battles, most of Jack's troops were either killed or wounded, leaving only him and his brother Tom to continue holding the line. Meanwhile, the enemy general had gained the upper hand, and he ordered his soldiers to capture the surviving civilians and militia, executing them one by one. Among them was Jack's fiancée, Jessica. The general, seeing Jessica's beauty, had malicious intentions and planned to take her to his chamber and insult her. Jessica refused to comply, biting the general's hand with all her strength. This enraged the general, and after throwing Jessica aside, he drew his sword and slowly walked toward her. At that moment, Jack arrived. This 8-year-old girl participated in the Super Warrior competition, competing alongside a group of adults. As the sound of the big gong rang out, the girl pulled back the bowstring like an arrow and shot forward. Under the watchful eyes of the judges, she jumped onto an iron pole. However, the other competitors chose the rope ahead. They quickly climbed up. The girl, not willing to be outdone, rapidly reached the peak. Using the rotational force of the iron pole, she leapt through the air to the large platform. The other competitors followed closely behind, jumping up. With her agile movements, the girl easily overcame the obstacles, then made a graceful turn and jumped onto the horizontal bar, moving forward as nimbly as a monkey, successfully avoiding the obstacles. She was the first to leap into the sea, swimming to the shore at the fastest speed. Next, she rode a black horse, galloping swiftly. Then she grabbed a bow and shot an arrow, hitting the target. But suddenly she crashed into a tree branch and fell off the horse. Seeing that the other competitors were about to catch up with her, she discovered a shortcut, sliding down the hill and directly jumping back onto the horse's back. She was the first to reach the final stage. When she picked up the spear to make the final strike, she was stopped by the examiner. The girl felt a sense of loss inside because she had taken the shortcut and cheated. At that moment, her mother came over, pointed to the golden warrior and said to her, "To be a true warrior, one must not take shortcuts but rely on real courage."
You're all right. Relashia.
The strange woman angrily leaned back. Suddenly, her entire body, including bones and skin, began to undergo drastic changes. In the end, she transformed into a massive snake thicker than a thigh. She then launched an attack on the circus ringmaster. Upon receiving the signal, the companions of the snake woman quickly cut open the cage that was holding the Thunderbird. Immediately, chaos broke out within the circus. Soon, a giant beast resembling a fierce tiger broke free from its restraints and roared loudly at everyone. Seeing the situation worsening, the circus ringmaster quickly instructed the staff to evacuate. The elf used magic to shrink several large tents into the circus wagons. The staff also escaped to other cities via portals. Only the giant beast remained, rampaging through the city. At the crucial moment, Newt arrived in time. Facing the approaching giant beast, Newt remained unfazed. These people angered the sea god. When the sea serpent prepared to attack, the man quickly pushed the ship to its maximum speed, trying to escape. However, the sea serpent had no intention of letting them go, and immediately began ramming into the ship. They thought they were going to die from the sea serpent's attack that day, but unexpectedly, the sea serpent suddenly disappeared. As they were feeling confused, they noticed the ship began spinning wildly. Ahead, a massive whirlpool appeared before their eyes. If they were sucked into it, they certainly wouldn't survive. Realizing the danger, the group scrambled to steer the ship, desperately trying to escape the whirlpool. But just when they thought they were making progress, the sea serpent reappeared. charging towards their ship. They quickly prepared the Sea Shaker cannon. With a loud boom, the Sea Shaker cannon hit the Sea Serpent with precision. But unexpectedly, the Sea Shaker cannon caused no damage at all, instead completely enraging the Sea Serpent. It continued to ram the ship, attempting to sink them. What made things worse was that the whirlpool had fully formed, and even the Sea Serpent realized the danger, desperately trying to escape the whirlpool's pull. At this moment, Jack came up with an escape plan, so he ran to the bow of the ship and fired the harpoon gun at the Sea Serpent, using it to drag the ship away from the whirlpool. Driven by the urge to survive, the Sea Serpent began pulling the entire ship rapidly out of the whirlpool. Just as they were about to escape danger, the harpoon gun suddenly detached. The Sea Serpent lost a lot of blood and fell into a coma, ultimately plunging into the whirlpool. The people on the ship were also sucked into the whirlpool. Fortunately, the seawater softened the impact, and they were unharmed, but it seemed they had entered a magical place. Jessica turned around in terror. Countless knife fish surged toward them like a tidal wave. This sight terrified her. Instinctively, she turned and ran. But strangely, her companion did not run. Instead, he grabbed her tightly and headed straight toward the knife fish swarm. He knew they could not escape. Their only chance of survival was to immediately hide inside the iron box ahead. As the man opened the iron box, he saved Jessica, quickly pulling her inside. Soon, the knife fish surrounded their iron box. The box began to develop holes as the knife fish tore at it. This sight terrified Jessica, causing her to scream uncontrollably. Time quickly passed and 2.5 years went by. Finally, the outside world calmed down. When they opened the iron box, they discovered the knife fish had left. The two survivors let out a sigh of relief, feeling fortunate to have escaped with their lives. But they didn't stop and continued their journey to find a safe island. To clean off the dirt on her body, Jessica had to use the nearby water source. At this moment, the man suddenly turned around, warned Jessica not to move, and slowly took off his shirt, walking toward her. This was Stephen's first time learning magic. While others effortlessly opened the portal, Stephen could only spark a few tiny flames. When the Ancient One came to check on his progress, Stephen made an excuse, claiming his hand was injured, and that was the reason he couldn't open the portal. The Ancient One didn't say anything. She simply called over a classmate. The classmate waved his hand, and a portal appeared right in front of them. At that moment, Stephen realized he had been making excuses. To accelerate his magical training, the Ancient One took him to the top of Mount Everest. Here, in just 10 minutes, they could freeze an elephant to death. To push Stephen's potential, the Ancient One turned around and left, also closing the portal behind her. In a life-or-death situation, Stephen's survival instincts exploded, but what he managed to conjure were still weak sparks. Just as the Ancient One was considering whether to bring him back, a light circle suddenly appeared. In the final moment before freezing to death, Stephen finally escaped back. From then on, it was as if he had activated a cheat code, learning magic 10 times faster than anyone else. He often used spatial magic to sneak a peek at the spellbooks in the secret chambers. Even while sleeping, he would use astral projection to keep studying. In just a few days, he finished reading all the spellbooks. But to go further and learn more advanced magic, he secretly took the sealed book on time magic. Following the spells in the book, he began to form the seals, and he really unlocked the Eye of Agamotto. Seizing the opportunity, he placed the time magic array on his hand, aimed it at the apple he had bitten, and began to turn it. Then a miraculous thing happened. Today I discovered a movie that has helped many people get out of difficult situations. When you realize that your current life is not right, do not hesitate. Watch this movie carefully. It can really help you earn a lot of wealth. Red's family was extremely poor. At the age of 15, he dropped out of school and started delivering ice. He worked hard every day. The most common thing he faced was the humiliation from wealthy kids of his age. These insults made him feel very embarrassed. While others were driving luxury cars and surrounded by beautiful women at the age of 15, he could only do dirty and tiring work. Although he was very angry, he felt powerless in the face of this reality gap. When he was filled with frustration, an old newspaper caught his attention. The newspaper published the story of billionaire Andrew. Andrew had also dropped out of school at the age of 15 and had faced discrimination and humiliation. But through hard work, he eventually became a billionaire. Red seemed to find resonance in his heart, secretly vowing to become a billionaire as well. Although the ideal was beautiful, the reality was very cruel. Their family was already destitute, and even getting a meal was difficult. His mother was bedridden with a serious illness. He didn't know how to achieve his dream, so he took out the newspaper and told his father, "I will become a billionaire." Unexpectedly, his father coldly scolded him.
"You ain't ever going to be rich. Only thing you're ever going to be able to count on is coming up on the shore. That's what was handed me by my daddy, and I'm sorry, but that's all you're ever going to get from me."
Red didn't say a word, but his heart was filled with determination. Late at night, he told his mother he was going out to make a living. Although he didn't know what the future held, at least one less mouth would be fed at home. The money saved might be used to buy medicine for his mother. His mother kept apologizing to him, feeling that she had become a burden to the family. After a kiss, Red tried hard to hold back his tears, turning around to prevent them from falling. At that moment, he silently swore again.
"No matter what Daddy says, I don't accept being poor as my destiny. I know my fortune's out there somewhere."
The little dog was about to die from the heat inside the car. A passing boy heard its whimpering. At that moment, the puppy had suffered from heat stroke and was unconscious. The boy's mother grabbed something and smashed the car window, rescuing the puppy. They named it Bailey. They also made a dog tag for it. From that moment on, Bailey had an owner, Jack. But in Bailey's heart, it was the dog that chose Jack. Soon, little Bailey grew into Big Bailey and fully integrated into the family. One time, the family went on vacation to visit the grandparents. As soon as Bailey got out of the car, it started chasing chickens. When it got thirsty, it ran back for some water. Then it started rolling in cow manure. It also found a deflated football, which became its new toy. Jack and Bailey's bond grew deeper, and they had a lot of fun together. When the house was empty, Bailey would get bored. Sometimes it played hide and seek with the family cat. However, Bailey also caused its fair share of trouble. Once it made a mess of Dad's office. As a result, Dad got angry because the boss was about to visit. Dad pulled out a treasured gold coin box. Jack started playing with the coins but accidentally dropped one. Bailey swallowed it. When the boss mentioned the gold coins, Dad went to get them. Luckily, Mom suggested waiting until after dinner. Jack took Bailey outside, hoping the dog would vomit the coin out. But Bailey had no idea what Jack was doing. Seeing Jack unhappy, Bailey became anxious. In its panic, Bailey's intestines began to move. The coin was eventually passed out. When they returned home, Dad was already holding the gold coin box. Jack quickly made up a lie, saying there were mice in the house. The boss's wife got scared and climbed onto a chair. Thus, a man, dog, and mouse showdown unfolded. In the confusion, Jack put the coin back into the box. The girl was horrified by the scene before her. The nearby monster seemed to sense her presence. Her father tried to save her by deliberately making noise to attract the monster's attention. However, when Anna tried to escape, the monster suddenly started chasing her frantically. Fortunately, at the crucial moment, Anna successfully locked the wooden door behind her, narrowly escaping. But no one could have predicted what happened next. When the monster's horn began to glow, Anna was entranced by just a glance. Just as she was about to fall into the monster's trap, a gunshot suddenly rang out, waking her up. The reason the monster had been chasing them could be traced back to 3 days earlier. That day, on their way to an interview, her father, due to his pollen allergy, accidentally sneezed. In that instant, a white horse suddenly appeared in the middle of the road. By the time Elliot reacted, it was too late. The white horse screamed in pain and collapsed. They were surrounded by desolate mountains, far from the hospital. Her father decided to help the horse find peace. He approached slowly with an iron rod. However, what happened next left them both stunned. A golden light suddenly emanated from the top of the white horse's head. Lily couldn't resist reaching out to touch it. The next second, her mind seemed to connect with the unicorn, and a cosmic nebula appeared before her eyes. The person's spine suddenly began to deform. He painfully raised his arm slowly. In that instant, everyone stared at him in terror. His left hand rapidly expanded, growing several times its normal size, and was covered with a hard material. Then growths that looked like armor began to appear on his back. The sight before them was frightening. Everyone's spines tensed up, no one dared to approach. His arm continued to grow at an astonishing speed. The pain seemed unbearable. He dragged his enormous arm, desperately searching for a place to hide. But before anyone could react, he transformed into a terrifying creature, floating in the air like a jellyfish. The scene left everyone in shock. Suddenly, the thug's hand slipped, knocking the club away. He was immediately locked onto by the monster. Then the monster morphed into a gigantic beast. The thugs had no time to react, it was already too late. They were facing a fate of death. This is an incredibly exciting and thrilling fantasy movie. I highly recommend watching the full version. It will not disappoint you. This man was once a top-tier agent. Later, he grew tired of the life filled with killing. So he chose to leave his job and began beekeeping. His landlady took care of him, and he often returned her kindness with honey. But it wasn't long before the landlady became a victim of an online scam. The money she had worked hard to save was stolen by the fraudsters. Unable to bear the blow, she chose to end her life with a gun. When Adam learned of this news, his anger was uncontrollable. He immediately took out a satellite phone and called an old colleague. With the colleague's help, he quickly tracked down the location of the fraud group. He drove his pickup truck straight there, intending to burn the place down with gasoline. But when he reached the entrance, the guards stopped him. Seeing his unfriendly demeanor, they immediately warned him to leave and prepared to draw their guns to force him out. However, within moments, both guards were taken down. Adam quickly disarmed the security guards' guns and strode into the building with gasoline. The building's lobby was filled with scam company employees. Adam walked to the center of the lobby and began pouring gasoline. Seeing this, the others panicked and fled. Just then, the company manager arrived. But Adam did not harm him. Instead, he attached 2 C4 bombs to the gasoline barrels and connected the phone lines to the bomb switches. Once the phone rang, the bombs would explode instantly. After finishing these tasks, Adam drove off in his pickup truck. Soon, a man, thinking he had won a prize, hastily dialed the scam company's number. The next second, the scam company was blown to pieces. To be continued. Wednesday was different from a young age. She kept a scorpion as a pet and often proudly walked it down the street. Her uniqueness made her the center of attention. One day, a group of boys surrounded her, pinned her down, and forced her to watch. When they pressed her beloved Scorpion under a bicycle, Wednesday was heartbroken. She buried her only friend and cried her last tear. In her heart, she swore never to cry again, knowing that tears solve nothing. As she grew older, Wednesday became very tough, and no one dared to mess with her. When she learned her brother was being bullied, she tracked down the bullies herself. Calmly, she took out 2 bags of piranhas and unhesitatingly threw them into the swimming pool, making the bullies pay the price. However, Wednesday was expelled from school because of this. Her parents had no choice but to send her to their alma mater, Nevermore Academy. The principal glanced at her records and noticed that she had attended 8 schools in 5 years, indicating she was a difficult student. But given that Wednesday's academic performance had always been excellent and her mother had been the principal's roommate, the principal decided to admit her against the usual rules. Wednesday was assigned to the dormitory where her mother had once stayed. Her roommate, a girl named Enid, warmly greeted her, but Wednesday did not respond. Her father had to explain that Wednesday always behaved coldly. Enid didn't mind, and at the principal's request, cheerfully showed Wednesday around the school. To be continued. Seeing the prisoner act so brazenly, however, just as he thought he was free, a guard burst in with a gun. This prison has an unspoken rule. All packages sent by family members must be opened in front of the guards. The purpose is to prevent contraband from entering. One day, a prisoner received nothing but an ordinary book. The guard didn't think much of it and left as usual, completely unaware that a belt was hidden in the spine of the book. This belt was the key to his escape. The man quickly used a spoon to make a simple dart, and the bottom of a bottle to create a launcher. He tore the elastic band off his underwear and tied it to the bedpost, making a basic trigger mechanism. With this, he had set a trap. After completing the setup, he pretended to have a stomachache and called for a guard. As per the rules, the guard had him turn around, handcuffed him, and made him take a step before opening the door. The man carefully stepped over the fine line, and the moment the guard opened the door, he quickly triggered the mechanism. The dart hit the guard's throat with pinpoint accuracy. The guard didn't have time to make a sound before collapsing. The man seized the opportunity to escape to the roof, climbed up an electric pole along the wall, and used the hidden belt as a cushion to slide down the wires and out of the prison. Meanwhile, the prison alarm blared loudly, but because it was dark, the guards had no idea where to chase. Luckily, the police dogs could track by scent. However, an unexpected event occurred. The man, who had been running for his life, stopped upon hearing the police dogs barking and turned back. It turned out he had already learned how to train police dogs. After some manipulation, the police dog obediently sat down. Under the watchful eyes of 2 police dogs, the man quietly disappeared into the darkness. This man, though young, is the strongest witch hunter on the continent. Over the past 10 years, he has killed over 600 evil witches. Wherever he appears, witches flee in fear. One day, Jack and his sister Gray receive a request from the mayor to help find a kidnapped child. Following the clues, the 2 find a dilapidated cottage. Sure enough, it hides a witch. When the witch sees the hunters approaching, she raises her staff and turns to flee. Jack is already waiting outside, and with one shot, he takes her down. After a fierce chase and fight, Jack and Gray successfully capture the witch. However, no clues about the child are found on her, only a blood-drawn astrological chart. To uncover the witch's true intentions, Jack and Gray set another trap in the forest. Soon enough, they catch a witch with a head like a durian. Before they can react, the witch suddenly breaks free from their grasp, mounts a broom, and prepares to flee. Jack swiftly throws the divine hook, using a large tree to block her. Finally, the wand slips from her hand and the witch is knocked unconscious. Back at the town, Jack learns from the witch's confession that her leader, the Black Phoenix, has developed a magical potion which, once consumed, makes one immune to fire. However, this potion requires the blood of 12 young boys and girls, and the heart of a white witch. Now they only need one more girl.